Now, if Andre has a great energy, I know that our next speaker will keep up the energy level. And I'm talking about Gonçalo Gaiolas. He is the CPO at SoSafe, a company dedicated to promoting cybersecurity awareness worldwide. With over a decade of experience in product leadership at OutSystems and a diverse background in business, leadership, low-code, and product management, his unique perspective is enriched by his passion for lifelong learning. The title of his talk is Beyond the Riddle, Unveiling the True Measures of Product Team Success. So let's solve this riddle together, and welcome Gonçalo Gaiolas.
It's 1963, and the BBC is doing an all-day live event of music. This is during the Beatles' heyday, right? The Beatles, absolutely, everybody wanted to get them. But because the Beatles had a pre-scheduled concert, they could only do not the final slot, but the slot before that. So they went, they did an amazing concert, and the BBC, they really tried to get somebody to come and play after the Beatles. They couldn't. So what did they do? They got a bunch of monkeys monkeying around. So I'm the monkey after the Beatles. No, just kidding. Andre did just a phenomenal job. I hope I can keep it up. I think, if I reflect back on the day, on everything that happened today and in the workshops yesterday, it is incredible how aligned this community is. Same principles all around, different perspectives. You got an incredible view of a very early stage company moving incredibly fast, reacting. It's gripping. You think I'm sitting there, at the edge of my seat. Today, I hope I can take you through some of my observations in larger scale companies in different environments. But you'll see that some of the patterns and the principles and the tactics even are very similar. So, a bit about myself. Most people call me Gigi in a professional setting. That happened because I kept a running list of how people messed up my first name. It's, in an international setting, it's so funny. My superpower is that enthusiasm is contagious. I'm not particularly smart, but I can pump people up to go do stuff. I like the timelines. We're going to talk about the timelines a little bit. And I am the Chief Product Officer at SoSafe, and spent many years in the local ecosystem at OutSystems as well. So, very happy to be here. And, because I'm so enthusiastic about these things, I talk to a lot of you. I like to give my time and just spend time talking to folks and understanding how folks are out there. And one observation that I have when I talk to other leaders, sometimes CEOs, sometimes board members, oftentimes product leaders, is they just say, the team, they're not moving fast enough. I guess, the guess part for me is the key insight. Because when I look at what the output is, the outcome is, what are the teams actually doing, it's very very hard to truly measure if you have a high performance product team. So I dwell on this, and I don't have, newsflash, I don't have the right answer, or I have the perfect answer, but I wanted to share my observations and share how I approach this, what questions do I ask, and how do I try to manage my own teams, because we can't seem to figure it out. Now, as an industry, we're evolving and we're getting more and more sophisticated. We have really good books. And everybody has read these books. This is not, the problem isn't the literature. The problem isn't that we haven't sort of figured this thing out. Now, it is hard, I will say, my observation, and raise your hand if you feel like this. It's very hard to take what's on these books sometimes and to translate it to the unique context of your market, your product, your team, your people. Like we are a one-of-a-kind thing. Raise your hand if you agree with this. Okay, pretty good. So I'm not alone, because I struggle. I read these things, and then it's like hard to match to what's actually happening. So we got to find ways, asking questions and sort of stumble to it. These are great principles. Then the job is to translate those to actionable execution in the one context that matters to you, which is your business, your organization, your team. Okay, so, talking to folks, going around, I have a 3-part empirical framework. Why is it a 3-part? I could give you, many research data points, or I could just say it's a psychologically satisfying number, which is the truth. Okay, let's go through this. And these are 3 questions. For those of you that don't know, Tammy and I, we go way back. Tammy has been my product coach. I highly recommend you engage with her, by the way. She's been very transformational for my career. Thank you, Tammy, for that. But I want to fight her on the 3 questions that matter, right? Now, I actually have 3 different questions. Again, you'll see that in the end, these are all variants of the same things. But the first one is that I ask CEOs this all the time. It's like, okay, are you hitting your product and business goals? You stop, right? And that's very interesting because that immediately starts to unveil part of the riddle. Because, what does good look like? A lot of the times, you go down one level, and Radhika talked about this in the morning, like, do they have an actual clear company vision? They'll always say yes. Then you go talk to the folks on the trenches, and everybody's ultra confused about what it is that we're trying to do as a company. There's an important asset in product companies, product strategy, company strategy. They're not the same, but they need to be tightly aligned. I learned this lesson the hard way. If you try to build a product strategy that is built on a silo and it is disconnected from what it is, the strategic intents Tammy talked about this morning, right? I learned that from Tammy through our time together. If you don't have clarity on the strategic intents at the company level, you are absolutely doomed to fail. Or the likelihood actually goes up like a lot. So I like to talk about, what's the company's vision at that very high level and what decisions have you made? And that's point number 2. My acid test for product strategy is it all apple pie and motherhood? And I learned this from my colleagues in the US. It's an awesome expression. If you don't know about it, apple pie and motherhood means things we all necessarily agree to. Nobody's going to say, motherhood is a bad thing, right? In product strategy, it's the same thing. If everything, you read through it, and there's nothing that makes you squirm that's not a hard, bold decision, you got to go a little bit deeper because you probably are trying to either go consensus or it's very, very hard. And, this happens just naturally because it's hard. It's hard to find a thing that is not, that's truly, you want to put down on paper a thing that's truly a hard decision. And the final thing for me in what good looks like, go back to this idea of the disconnect between what the CEO has and the management team. They have this clear vision, and how does it get deployed? How does it get monitored? How do people and folks use that on a day-to-day basis to make decisions? So I ask my teams. I have an ongoing survey. How is the product strategy? How much, on a scale of 0 to 10, is the product strategy helping you make day-to-day decisions? And it's an acid test, because if folks can't connect the 2 things, the day-to-day actions, a big majority of the actions and the effort and the energy they're putting in, there's something off, and you should look into that. And, this man, Andre, talked a lot about setting these product goals. They're very, very hard. I think part of the reason why they're hard is, again, the merchants of complexity that we've become as an industry. We make all these different frameworks and North Star impact trees and standard metrics. It's super hard. They're useful, but it takes a while. It's a tool of craftsmanship that takes a while to get there, because you have to understand the tool in of itself. You have to understand the context. You have to react relatively quickly. And when trying to combine these 2 things, I see 2 anti-patterns, and we're going to talk about my personal approach in a second. The 2 anti-patterns that I see is folks that just follow blindly the frameworks with very poor attention to, again, the context and what are you trying to do and what is the sophistication in the organization, or folks that completely ignore this and they just set like random goals and they forgo all the shared knowledge that we have. So how do I like to do it? And again, this is my example that I think has worked well for my limited experience. It's 3 things. Tammy, I think, talked about you can start in different places. Here's the same thing. You can start in different places, but I'll start from the right. Very specific business results you want to achieve as a company. I'd be shocked as, again, going back to the idea of what do we want to do as a company? Do we want to increase revenue, protect revenue? Do you want to decrease risk? Just be very, very clear on that. At a specific role I had, I spent almost 3 months with my only job as a VP of product was to corral everybody else, right? And by everybody else, I mean VPs of sales, COOs, things like that, to have a unique, consistent plan at the business level. You got to start there. Otherwise, it's very hard to figure out if you're doing a really good job to hitting those goals. Now, From that, you can actually derive these product goals. And I like this idea of the strategic narrative that drives ambition. What is it? This is a story. We all know the power of stories. You have, I think Randy said it, you have to simplify this down, Feynman method technique. 6-year-old, do you understand the strategic narrative? What are we doing? What's the old world? What's the new world? And you can start to bake in the shipping level goals, and you can start to bake in the product level goals, again, connected to the specific business needs. And finally, in larger teams, and these days I run larger teams, you want to get back to specific product input metrics, things that they can control and hopefully monitor, in my case, on a week-on-week basis. And this is where the frameworks start to get interesting around activation and retention and things like that. But to me, the connective tissue and figuring out what the connective tissue is between these three things is the most important thing that I've seen work. And there's a little T, like a function that connects all of these three things. You have to understand what the organization looks like. So for example, at OutSystems, everybody was super cerebral. And everybody believed in mental models and connections. So you needed to write down and have almost a thing that said, if I hit these product goals, they in our case were about adoption. So I have X many developers building Y many apps and having Z many users, I know this is going to translate into the revenue growth, margin growth we have. Here's the proof. Here's the scientific proof that I have to do that. It's data, it's correlation, it's data science and analysis. Other companies, you don't need to do this, but you need to figure out what is the translation so that this thing is cohesive. And you need to figure out what this T function looks like, right? So where does this thing often go wrong, in my experience? First, these things on the left, if you go too generic, then they might not be useful. Ideally, they might be unique to your own product. So for example, at SoSafe, we really care that people use our product, it's a security awareness tool, to have insightful analytics and to actually drive action. So we measure the number of back-end admins that go to a specific piece of the product and they drive an action that increases the security of the company. This is a very specific metric. We're the ones that care about it, right? You have to resist the temptation to go fully generic on these metrics. So that's thing number one. Now, I know probably Melissa is going to talk a lot about this. I actually learned from Melissa Perry at their CPO Accelerator course, the importance of having strong analytics teams within product operations. Very, very critical. This is very hard to do if your analytics team sucks. So this is an investment I highly recommend you do. Could start with a product manager that really knows his way around data, have a dedicated senior data analyst. Like at SoSafe, it was my first hire, was bringing in somebody to do data analysis, and it fundamentally changes the story you can tell. And these stories are the only motivational elements we have, right? So I'm not going to make this point anymore because this man made the point for me. You want things that make people uncomfortably excited, that they can commit to, but they feel a little bit impossible. I have a cool story recently from SoSafe in the last 6 months. I gave them, we're not going to go into the specific details, but the team came back 5 hours later with a memo of the thing that I had asked him, and they called it Project Tom Cruise. And I'm like, why do you call it Project Tom Cruise? Because it's impossible. which I thought was, I got to that point and I said, job well done, right? Now, if they think it's impossible, then you're already at the right level. And finally, obviously, I've already talked about this. You need the translation mechanisms to say, if I achieve these product goals, more developers, more things, more apps, then the end result will come. Oftentimes, it comes through packaging and pricing, for example. You say, okay, if I hit these things, I know that this will result in the typical advancement in the ARR or revenue goals for the company, but you need to be able to have that translation between your product goals and what the specific business outcomes that your board cares about, that your CEO, your CFO are going to care about. Sometimes there's going to be a little bit leap of faith, which is okay in the beginning, and you iterate and you learn and you do more analysis. So that's thing number one. Are we hitting our goals? Do we know what our goals are? Do we know where we're going? And do we have a way to then measure them and cascade them down in larger organizations to the smaller teams? Now, part number two. Are we working efficiently? Nothing drags teams more, I think, than complexity. And it just like sneaks up on you. It's so easy. Especially, like, I am not incredibly structured as a leader. My tendency, natural tendency, which I try to combat, is to just add more stuff because I get enthusiastic about ideas. And let's go try this thing. And it just creeps up on you, right? Complexity just creeps up on you. Often, then you'll have the discussion of, oh, we need more process. And it's fine. Sometimes process helps, sometimes it doesn't. But I would say as a leader, doesn't matter if you have the title or not, reducing complexity is one of the most high leverage activities you can ever do. Like consciously sitting down to remove cognitive and process complexity is a thing that it is your job if you care about having a sustainable long-term team that really delivers and moves fast. Now, I learned this the other day. I was hearing a podcast from Shreyas Doshi, very good podcast in the Knowledge Project, and he talks about this idea of measurement and evaluation versus evaluation. I think as an industry, sometimes we obsess about perfect or very good proxy metrics to measure things. Like, and in our conversations today, we're trying to measure delight. Cool. No problem with measurement. We talked a lot about analytics, but sometimes you just know you suck. Right? You don't need a number to tell you that you suck. And you actually know, you can feel it in your bones, what does better look like. Right? The example Shreyas uses is, no, I don't have a metric if I'm a good parent or not, but I'm getting better over the years. I know it. So we have to be comfortable as well, sometimes just saying, okay, we evaluate our own performance, and it's not going to be metrics driven. Point is, don't let the metrics necessarily get in the way of your striving for reducing and managing actively the complexity that creeps into your teams. Some examples, measurements that we've put in place, things like the individual flow at the individual level, very important, manager versus maker time. You know, if you've heard of this, how much time do you spend actually building things versus how much time do you spend in the surrounding things around building. Percentage of wasteful time. I'll tell you a little bit about this one. This is very important. I have a slide further down the road. But things like, I really like to measure customer intimacy and knowledge. How many conversations have we had? How much time in discovery versus delivery? Really understanding the flow of work is very, very important. So you're trying to understand if the team is doing activities that in the long run are going to be conducive to adding value back to hitting the product goals and to the final thing, to making teams very, very productive. Now, if you go all into the DORA metrics, that's good as well. Quality and efficiency, certainly deployment frequencies, things like that. But the point being, you want to certainly measure, evaluate, and you want the teams to have conversations about what is holding them back from the perspective of moving faster. I 100% agree with Andre. I think no matter what the size is, a very strong differentiator, a very strong competitive advantage is the shipping rate, because you get to learn a lot and you get to be more bold and more audacious, right? If you can't do that, then you're going to overscope things in the beginning. It's just going to take you have a cannonball as opposed to having many different little shots, and you want to go more in that direction. Now, I run this survey all the time. Simple. How productive did you feel like today? It's not like rocket science. People will define it differently. But then, they'll tell you what happened. And you have to read. You actually have to go eat the broccoli and read this stuff. And you got to talk to the teams. You have to make it a leadership item to start to proactively chip away at the complexity that has settled in. I know a lot of us went through the boom cycle, 2020, 2021. We're going to pay down all that, and a lot of it is manifested in, frankly, we're just not very productive anymore. So it's, again, our jobs as leaders to manage down, to simplify. I try one thing that I invite you to all try. It's super cool. People want to add more things. I want to add more things as well. Simple rule. Yeah, we can add more things. For each one of the ones you're going to add, you got to remove at least 2. Try it. Just try it to have the good conversations around it. Oh, cool. I want to bring this customer insights and feedback tool. Okay, what does that replace? Well, replace this Excel over here. We're going to get that done with that. It replaces this other tool over here. Cool. Then you can do it. And it's a very blunt tool, but it works wonders because it gets people in the mindset of, how do I do less things? How do I subtract instead of being additive, which is what we are all by default. Okay. Now, my final part is my favorite part. My, my ex-boss once told me, there are two types of people in the world. There are people that care about things, and there are people that care about people. And you just care about people. And he was, right. I care a lot about people. I think having teams that ship fast, but having people that are absolutely engaged at all levels with what you're trying to do is the only long-term sustainable competitive advantage that you can have. So we spend a lot of time on growing the teams in a happy, healthy way. I like to use the sentence, taking a long view on people. Because a lot of the times, when you take a long view on people, you will excuse short-term performance issues because the potential is there and the growth path is there. So, building a team that's high performance, it's not necessarily about having everybody at the peak of their performance at every given point in time. It's also about having a long view. Tammy talked a lot about treating ourselves as a product and having a roadmap. I really like doing that. I had a key result, which was, I want 3 people from my team to become CPOs in 3 to 5 years. I'm 1 for 3. So, I still have two more years, and it will happen. And that's because you're taking the long view and growing and understanding where folks are. But it is important that you understand, again, going back to your system of work, your context and your organization. What do people value around it? Because it's very hard to try to have this long view if your CEO is pushing you on short-term performance, and that's everything that happens. Or is this more of if you've ever worked, for example, with Japanese companies, very much incremental and long-term improvement. It's fine. We talk in 3-year timelines, but you're doing weekly Kaizen. So you got to understand what are the typical expectations. Don't bring your own out of the blue. Understand what are the expectations of the organization. And I'm going to beat the dead horse, understand what's the current state. In this specific case, current state might be team engagement metrics. Are people engaging with the work? And a lot of tools out there do a good job at measurement, engagement and satisfaction in people. You can deploy things to measure team maturity, to understand what's happening. It's important, to me, if you want to have and measure the performance of a team, it's as important to have a very strong product strategy as it is to have a very strong people strategy, right? You want to get that team and you want to treat them as a product, which means you have to have a strategy, a set of choices, and a diagnosis, a coherent set of actions that you're going to take, and an understanding almost at the individual level, where are you taking these people? It's very, very important. So one of the things we tried, I'm super proud, I use this example all the time, and I think the person speaking next to me was the mastermind behind this. She actually executed, it's Annabella, she's there on the picture. At OutSystems, we figured out that we had so many specificities, and it was so hard for us to find the right type of product manager, that it was just much better to build academy where we could train folks on this. And it was just a massive investment. We had a person to run this whole thing. We brought in world-class speakers. That's how we met Tammy. We had Bruce coming in with giving us roadmaps. We had classes on storytelling. It was super well done. You went through the exercises, and after you've done the exercise, the workshops, you would immediately apply it the next day. Now, I think this is a bit extreme, especially for nowadays. But think about what would it be the big thing that you can do to really drive your people to the next level. How do you make them feel like they're the most important thing in that company? Because if they feel that, they feel they have a growth path and that you're investing in them. And this it clearly made people feel like that. We eventually use it as a recruitment tool. But if people feel like that, they will commit to 24-hour timelines, right? They will understand, they get the mission, they know you care about them, they know you care about the customers. And this is, I think, the final piece that we often forget. We talk a lot about the product and the customers. We've got to talk about the people as well. I really like a similar approach to what I think Andre was saying. To me, the approach around people is you set this one big audacious goal, it's one big thing, but you have to be very careful with the small bar raisers. The small things that either processes or the way you treat people, you have to I do this on a quarterly basis. I try to have one big theme for a quarter, which is developing the people, and then having symbolic things that you make a big deal out of that might be small processes or small events or small things that are happening across the organization that everybody took for granted, like the way you do, performance management. And you just make a big point of raising that while you're doing the big goal. And that continuous focus on the individuals, on treating them as a product and growing them, will really reap a lot of benefits. So, certainly not rocket science. Are we hitting our product goals? Are we working efficiently? And are we growing our teams in a healthy way? Are people happy? Not very hard, right? Deceptively, every night when you're in the weeds, you can lose track of these things. But I recommend you try to at least ask these 3 questions and then go reach your own conclusions about what area do you need to go for, right? Do you need to focus more on the people side? Do you understand the goals? Is the team actually set up for success, and are they working the most efficient way? So I want to leave you with something to read next. I'm a big fan of, this actually has a video here, we're not going to play it. I'm a big fan of John Cutler. This is from a conference at Amplitude. This is a framework for improving product team performance. It's a little bit more, I think, advanced, abstract, intelligent than what I'm showing here, but it's very good read if you want to understand the system-wide approach to how you can continuously measure and improve how your team works. So highly recommend you watch or read this next. Thank you for your time and for your attention. Thank you for talking.